What is up? Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I got a really interesting video coming for you today. What if Thanos had to fight the MCU villains instead? That's a little crazy to think about. There's some powerful villains out there. Let's see what they got for us today. I'm excited. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Got Mjolnir and the shield right off the bat. Coming from comic books versus the world. This should be a good one.
The MCU version of Thanos is a pretty tough guy, to say the least, to the point where it took the combined might of pretty much every hero in the universe, an Infinity Gauntlet, and the sacrifice of Iron Man to finally take down the Mad Titan once and for all.
Hope I didn't spoil the movie for anybody.
So yeah, it's pretty clear that the
Spoiler
heroes
alert,
were
by the
way
way.
over their head when they had to go up against him in both
I like that
Infinity
image
War
of
and
Deadpool,
Endgame.
though.
But what if a different group of supers got the chance to go up against Thanos instead? Maybe instead of some heroes, he could try his luck against some of the different villains in the MCU. Could be pretty cool, right? Turns out a lot of other people thought so too, because I actually saw a post on Reddit a few days ago featuring this amazing piece of art where we can see Thanos fighting a decent collection of villains, including Ironmonger, Hela, Ultron, Abomination, Ego, Vulture, Yellow Jacket, Killmonger, and Red Skull during the reimagined version of the battle on Titan. It's definitely a very powerful group of bad guys, but could they actually do a better job than the heroes did and stop Thanos right then and there? You know, assuming that some of these guys winning in their respective movies somehow doesn't erase the other ones from existence, and that they're all willing to work together, and that Thanos had the stones he actually had at the start of the Titan fight, that being the power, space, reality, and soul stones. Well, honestly, it'd be a pretty tough battle, but in the end, I think, who am I kidding? Thanos would get his ass obliterated, like, badly. Before
Facts though, man.
I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
Alright. One second.
Attention gamers.
Oh man, bro, he would literally just, it would be over for him. It would be over.
Skillshare is an amazing online community
Alright,
with
this is
thousands and
we're
thousands
gonna
of really
skip
cool
ahead. We're gonna skip
method and
ahead.
exercises.
Here we go.
Always something
Here
new
we
to
go.
learn. Plus, it's less than
Oh,
$10 a
oh.
month with an
I got you,
until some of
baby.
these
Here we
guys
go.
were dead first before he came out of the woodwork.
Move this man!
Now hold on, I'm not saying he wouldn't get a few good shots in at least. Out of everybody fighting Thanos here, I'm guessing Ironmonger, Red Skull, and Vulture would all pretty much die right away, thanks to being completely worthless by this point in the timeline. Even assuming everybody had a
Facts.
few extra years to modify their suits, work out the kinks in their weapons, all that good stuff,
William, here is the technology. I've asked you to simply make it smaller.
Okay, sir, that's what we're trying to do. but
Tony Stark was
honestly,
able to do
it's
it.
impossible.
all three of them are still much weaker and using outdated tech compared to what all Thanos actually went up against on Titan. For example, the Ironmonger suit may have been able to take a punch over 10 years ago, but the suit's incredibly bulky and crazy slow, two of the worst things you could bring to the table in a fight like this. Considering Thanos had zero trouble keeping up with Tony's much more advanced Mark 50 and 85 suits years after his fight with Obadiah, I'm pretty sure that means Thanos could pretty much just make Obi explode by looking at him. As for the Skull, again, not fast or strong enough to go head to head with Thanos, so he might be more useful hanging back and working out the team strategy. But comics, what about those Tesseract weapons Hydra came up with, you might be saying? Well, unfortunately, those things probably wouldn't work so well in this fight either. I mean, they were based on Arnim Zola's pretty limited understanding of what all the Space Stone actually was, and considering how they seem pretty easy to dodge for a fresh-faced Captain America, there's no reason to assume Thanos couldn't do the same thing, or just make the rifles not work using one of the other stones he had access to by this point. I don't know, maybe he could have turned them into bats, or just crushed the entire Hydra force Red Skull had with him on Titan's moon or something. Vulture, unfortunately, really isn't worth mentioning in this fight. I mean, he can fly, but Thanos didn't really have a problem with flyers in either Infinity War or Endgame, and the weapons Toombs' crew made out of the leftover Chitauri tech seem mostly ineffective when not aimed at a local deli, to say the least. Either way, I really can't see
They just
these
cause,
three
like,
doing all that much in the
mass
long term
damage
without a lot of
versus
extra support from their
actual, like,
teammates.
precise shots.
Yellow Jacket, Killmonger, and Abomination, meanwhile, would definitely be a big help in this fight if the villains went into it with a bit of strategy. Like, remember that goop gun thing Darren Cross came up with? I know he probably doesn't carry it around with him after he puts on the Yellow Jacket armor, but it could come in handy if he managed to catch Thanos off guard. I mean, seriously, just turn him into some purple goo. Fight's over. Having said that,
Facts,
though,
though.
Cross would have to get close enough to actually use it, otherwise he probably could have just shot Frank from the bathroom door and not bothered talking to him in the first place, and Thanos might be able to catch him before he gets a shot off, and all of that's ignoring the very real possibility that the gun probably isn't included on any of that weaponry anyway, like I mentioned earlier. Or that Thanos could just use the Space Stone or something and just avoid the shot altogether. Emil Blonsky, meanwhile, was shown as being stronger and more intelligent in his Abomination form than baseline Hulk back in 2008, so considering the possibility that he could have gotten even stronger by the events of Infinity War, maybe from some extra experimentation by the newly mutated Sam Stearns or something, and adding in whatever hand-to-hand training Blonsky had as a regular soldier, there's no question that he'd be a serious opponent for almost anybody else. Having said that though, I can't imagine he'd do that much better than Hulk did at the start of Infinity War.
And as you mentioned, he is fairly invincible. He's this sort of, genetic mutation who's the Genghis Khan of the universe, is unbeatable on the battlefield, and stronger than the Hulk, skin is invincible.
Add on the extra weak spots those bone protrusions give him, and I can definitely see Abomination quickly going down, assuming he doesn't have any extra support from this group. He and Killmonger might make a good tag team though. A powerhouse keeping Thanos on his toes, and someone a bit more nimble slipping in, doing some damage with his vibranium weapons, it might work out okay. Assuming Blonsky gets taken out relatively quickly though, I could definitely see Killmonger getting caught and knocked out eventually, just like T'Challa during the fight in Wakanda. Now we come to Ultron, and this is when things really start to get interesting. Considering his abilities and potential during and after Age of Ultron, I'm starting to think the crazy robot, and maybe an army of drones for added oomph, could probably take out Thanos and the Black Order by themselves. I mean, come on, think about it. If he won at any point in that movie, Ultron would easily be one of the most powerful and dangerous enemies Thanos would ever have to go up against in Infinity War. Not only would he have access to all of Vision's insanely powerful abilities, like density manipulation and energy blast with the Mind Stone, and not only would he probably go on to raid Wakanda for more vibranium at some point to beef up his ever-growing army of drones, all of which would definitely receive an insane amount of upgrades during the years between Age of Ultron and Infinity War. But just think about what that would mean for Earth.
He would
just
have,
being what he is, Ultron's connected to every single computer, every single camera, every single bit of technology that exists or ever will exist.
He's in your files, he's in the internet.
He'd have eyes and ears all over the planet, and since he's not spending any time with an Elizabeth Olsen type, it's not like Ultron would ever put himself in a situation where he'd get dropped like a chump in a surprise attack either. Actually, fuck the cameras, he'd have access to an Infinity Stone for at least a few years, not only giving him plenty of time to both study it and figure out how it works, kinda like Vision did, but better, but it would also give him even bigger and badder ideas for upgrades to his drones, as well as being a useful early warning system for whenever Thanos shows up.
That would be insane. That would just be crazy. To see Ultron at as far as he could develop himself with like all of those things and that much time available to him, it would be insane.
It's also important to remember that Ultron was literally designed to stand up against alien invasions.
What if next time aliens roll up to the club, and they will, they couldn't get past the bouncer?
So if he had time to reach his full potential, I think he'd be able to do it no problem. Then
That
we get into
would be
both Hela
absolutely
and
insane.
Ego,
Yeah,
and honestly,
I don't
these
even
two
wanna
being thrown
imagine
into the
that
mix is a
combo.
ridiculous level of overkill in my opinion. Both of them are easily around Thanos' base strength level, with Ego capable of lifting ships and smashing through stone, while Hela's capable of going toe-to-toe with some of the strongest beings in the universe and crushing Mjolnir with one hand. Ego in particular is insanely strong thanks to being a Celestial, a group, mind you,
Yeah,
that could
'cause
casually
Hela
wield
was even
Infinity
stronger
Stones without
than
any
Thor,
issue,
pretty
but even
much.
without the stones, he's an amazing asset to any team, thanks to being able to use his energy to make pretty much whatever he wants at a moment's notice, from starships to random Kurt Russell bodies. Speaking of, Ego's human avatar is basically immortal and capable of regenerating from scratch as long as his weirdly human-looking brain remains intact, so there's really not a whole lot Thanos could do to put him down for long. Even if Thanos knew he'd need to directly attack Ego's planet form for whatever reason, it's highly unlikely he'd be able to focus long enough to land a killing blow, given that Ego can make new defenses around his core if needed, and probably even hit Thanos from a bunch of different directions all at once. It's not mentioned whether or not Ego could make a bunch of different copies of his avatar, but since he believed he could turn a bunch of different planets into extensions of himself, I assume he'd be able to make a bunch of avatars to attack Thanos from different fronts. Of course, Ego was also shown as being a competent enough fighter to keep up with multiple adversaries, so he probably wouldn't need the extra Russells to take on Thanos in the first place. Hela, meanwhile, was shown to be casually more powerful and arguably more skilled than pretty much every other Asgardian in history aside from Odin, being capable of defeating Thor, the full power of the Asgardian army, and even all of the Valkyries single-handedly. Like Ego, Hela's also
she's
insanely
insane.
skilled in
That would be
combat,
insane.
thanks to her history leading the legions of Asgard during Odin's more conquest-happy days. Hela's so skilled, in fact, that she was able to take on multiple enemies and even vehicles at once. And thanks to the Necrosword she uses during the Ragnarok movie, she's also able to land death blows against even fully armored Asgardians from a distance. Assuming she knew Thanos would be arriving on Titan early, it's possible she'd be able to come up with a decent plan to keep him off balance and put the Mad Titan down before he had a chance to make a solid first move. Even if she had to fight Thanos herself though, she's also
1v1,
pretty tough,
that would be
shrugging off
insane,
hits from Thor without issue, and was basically shown as being unbeatable without the intervention of a mountain-sized Surtur. So yeah, I think these two would be able to keep up with a handful of Infinity Stones if need be. And that's it, that's all the villains in this picture. I know there's others we could add in here, like Caecilius and Dormammu, Whiplash, or any of the drones he made for Justin Hammer, the real
versus
Mandarin, literally any of the
Dormammu would
villains in
be
any of the TV or Netflix
insane.
shows. But honestly, adding any of them
Or
would just
the
give
Mandarin.
Thanos a bigger body count before eventually getting taken out, or just make things more of a stop for the group fighting him. Either way, this assortment of bad guys is insanely powerful, and even without making tons of assumptions on what all they'd be
That
up
would
to
be
by the time Thanos started
absolutely
putting together the
insane.
Infinity Gauntlet, it does seem like they would have done a much better job saving the planet than the heroes did. However, all of that is assuming that they would work together, and since most of these guys have zero interest in group activities, or even the rest of humanity in general,
I mean, they
who
might.
really knows what
They
all
might
would
work
happen in a
together.
scenario
I don't
like
know
this.
about that.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
But anyways, guys, that's my take on what all would happen if Thanos had to fight the villains
Yeah,
during the
that
Titan
was
battle
crazy.
in
That
Avengers
was
Infinity
crazy.
War.
I really think it would be an insane battle. I don't know which way we go. I kind of got to pull for the villains, if I'm being honest. You guys let me know what you think. That was a good one. Until the next one.